My name is Rosa, and I'm going to be the moderator for this panel. I work for Accenture and in the Accenture Technology Innovation Incubation, and I lead the Metaverse strategy for Asia Pacific and Europe at Accenture. And today we're going to talk about tackling scalability, interoperability, and the open metaverse, which is a big topic that is deeply interconnected to the meaning itself of the metaverse. And we have two amazing guests on this panel. Unfortunately, we had one defection due to COVID, but I think that we're going to be able to jazz it out together pretty quickly and pretty easily. I would like to introduce the guests, and actually I would like the guests to introduce themselves. Cathy, would you like to give an introduction of yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Nick, and hello everyone. Nice to be here. My name is Cathy Lee. I work for the World Economic Forum. That's my water.
Oh, sorry about that.
No, it's still pandemic time.
Okay, yes, sorry. I thought it was mine. Maybe I can get some water from the team. Thank you, sorry.
So I work for the World Economic Forum, which is a international organization for public-private collaboration. And the forum, I think many of you may know what we do. We bring together political, business, and culture leaders and other leaders together to shape the global, regional, and industry agenda. I had the media, entertainment, and sport platform, one of the 16 platforms that the forum has, which means that the forum has 16 thematic areas to explore, and media, entertainment, sport is one of them. And we run those kind of large-scale initiatives, such as tackling harmful content with Global Coalition for Digital Safety, and Power Media with a focus on D&I in media and content, and then recently launched Defining and Building the Metaverse initiative just last month in Davos. So again, really happy to be here, and thanks for having us.
Happy to have you, Cathy. Fabio, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Fabio Franca. I'm the founder of Blueverse Ventures. Blueverse is a young, new advisor and investor in all things metaverse. I would say we operate at the intersection of, if there was a Venn diagram, those are quite popular. If there was a Venn diagram, we operate at an intersection of immersive computing and Web3. And we advise, invest at early stage, startup, global, because founders are everywhere now. I also work for the European Commission and the European Innovation Council, where we deploy 10 billion euros over 5 years. And I'm also part of a member of the forum for their Global Future Council for VR and AR, and this new initiative, which I'm very pleased to be a part of.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Now, I would like to do a little bit of a check on the room, a sense check on the room. I would like to understand, who has heard about the metaverse in this room? Please raise your hand. Pretty much everybody. This is great. So we have a well-versed audience about the metaverse. And who owns a crypto wallet? Wow. Wonderful. And who has a VR headset? Pretty good.
Yeah,
pretty good.
Absolutely.
And who has experienced first-person platforms like Decentralized, Sandbox, and Roblox? I think that we are out of target here. Not many Gen Z and Gen M, but that's great. That's amazing. So I think that we can go straight into the first question, that is, what are, from your point of view, the biggest challenges about the metaverse from a business perspective, technological perspective, user experience, and eventually inclusivity and sustainability? What are the biggest challenges that companies that are operating in the metaverse ecosystem and stack need to face right now?
Would you like to go first?
Cathy, would you like to start?
Of course. So that's a wonderful question, and it's going to take a long time to get to each of the points that you just raised. But in terms of business, I would think, first of all, for the businesses that are building the foundational layers for the metaverse, first of all, in terms of the business intelligence, in terms of the investment that needs to be made, what are the use cases that will prevail in the next decade, and what kind of timing that these organizations need to grab in order to mitigate the risk of, acting too early or too late. those are definitely some of the challenges. And then in terms of the content layer, if you think about the business model within this industry over the past decade or so, the industry has definitely been struggling from the advertising model to the subscription model.
Yep.
So in the future, what would the Metaverse business model look like? Is it really going to be still very much rooted in the Web 2.0 kind of presence and still have this kind of very predominantly advertising model, which causes a lot of the challenges and problems as we've seen during the past, past decade? Or would it be a more of a subscription model? But then again, that also requires massive, public buy-in. So that's definitely some of the challenges that business will need to tackle. Do you want Fabio to address?
Fabio, would you like to continue?
Sure. Thank you. I think we could have even started with how many of you have at least one email, and then if you go back to the early days of the internet, you know, from the moment you created your email, could be 1994, 1995 or earlier, to when you downloaded Facebook for the first time, let's say. How many years that actually took, and when you compare what's the people who don't have a crypto wallet in the room yet, then that gives you the sort of the curve, the journey to go to. So I think on the technological layer, I think on the infrastructure technological layer, I think there are lots being done. I think lots of Web3 founders out there working on the infrastructure of Web3 or Web 5, I think we all know, or Web 6, I'm not sure. I go with Web plus 1 these days.
Let's try to make people understand what is Web 3 exactly, then eventually we can start talking about Web 5. There's a lot of confusion.
So there's always a cycle, like an infrastructure cycle and an application cycle. So Bitcoin was the first real infrastructure cycle with blockchain, and then other applications came after that. I think we might go into an application stage now where it's about, okay, what do we do with interoperability, and why do we need it? And why, I mean, we can ask the 5 whys even. Why do we need that? And some people don't even understand it or don't know how to get there. It's just the usage, the application, and the industry that would drive the interoperability.
But it seems to me that, and I mean, I love your points, and it seems to me that we are talking about digital primitives here that we're facing, which are the first use cases for that any new technology and any new medium experience first as a first wave, a sort of a skeuomorphic era. So we kind of emulate the use cases of previous technologies before finding the real transformational use cases 5-10 years after, exactly like what happened with the internet. We were just using the internet in the 90s that were just glorified websites, and then it became Facebook, and then it became Tinder, and then it became Shazam, and then it became Uber, and so on. So you have this emergence, and we don't have that yet. So do you think that this is the right time for companies to enter the metaverse, or is it too early? Cathy?
Well, I think, so to your point, applications, and also Fabio's point, applications usually come much earlier than the infrastructure layer is fully matured. And then you can really predict the future state of, how this is going to change how we live, how we work, how we earn. But then at the same time, as long as we have a unified vision, well, I can't say unified because there are different versions of it, but at least as long as people believe that the internet will continue evolving, it will evolve into something that we can't really predict yet because humans are terrible at predicting the future. But at least, let us encourage the innovations that's going to happen. Let, everyone try what they do the best, and maybe we'll end up with a version of the metaverse. But speaking of that, I do want to pick up on one point that Fabio just mentioned on interoperability. You asked about some of the challenges with technology. So, I'm not a technologist, but I can at least speak to just a few challenges. Think about interoperability. We all know, and when we announced the initiative last month, we said the metaverse needs to be interoperable. But think about that for a second. What does that even mean? Right now, we can't even agree on how do we log on to, each individual websites. There's no universal identity.
Exactly.
How is that going to be how is that going to become a reality, right? What kind of, infrastructure needs to be put in place? Does that mean every single virtual world and platform needs to be interoperable with each other, open with each other, or do we still allow some of them to continue to operate, in the centralized way that they know that can deliver the best user experiences, and let the foundational layer, when it comes to data ownership and property rights, identity to become interoperable. Those are some of the challenges that we don't have answers right now.
And right now, maybe we can explain a little bit the difference between centralized and decentralized metaverse for the people that don't know what we're talking about. Fabio, would you like to give this?
Yeah, sure. Very quickly to echo what Cathy said, I think to put it another way in plain English, we don't want metaverse that's meta, just like we didn't want
Absolutely.
an internet that was Google. And once you frame that, you go, well, okay, this is where we can introduce the idea of interoperability and why it's so important. And then the metaverse is a destination. Why the decentralization piece is very important is because it's flipping the model. It's going from those big platforms, Web2 platforms, having ownership of data and of digital lives, to actually us getting back control. God, I can't believe I'm saying that expression in England in 2022, but it is about getting control back of our own data and what we do with it, and not having our data monetized, harvested, extracted, manipulated, because it has value. And decentralization is revolutionary in the sense that you can flip this model and get some ownership back.
But there is a problem with decentralization, because there are some companies that, for example, for local legislation or governance or legacy systems, will not be able to be decentralized probably for many years. But at the same time, in order to have the vision of the metaverse, which is this network of interconnected platform together, and please don't call them metaverses, there's only one metaverse. We need this kind of interoperability that will connect blockchain system with centralized system. What do you think needs to happen in order to tackle this kind of problem, Fabio?
Yeah, well, great question. If I knew. It's like we talked about the infrastructure layer and the application layer. Yeah. I think we need to see an uptake in crypto wallets adoption. We need to see the sequencing. I mentioned the sequence from the first time you created an email to when you downloaded Facebook. You need an email to download Facebook. Once you have a crypto wallet, other applications will come to you. Which killer app will come? I mean, is it Bitcoin? Is it another infrastructure? That we'll see, which is why I look a lot at blockchain gaming and Web3 gaming, because there are 3 billion gamers in the world. They drive technological advances. They want to have a very seamless experience and a great experience. So they're very demanding in terms of on the tech front. And because of the mass of that population of gamers, then it sort of drives. I mean, the conversation, remember, started with Epic Games and Fortnite, where you can get your skins and different characters. It's just a proto-metaverse. It's an idea of the metaverse, but it could be bigger than that. Now, in terms of how we get there, so if the metaverse is what we used to call the internet, and with a capital M, I imagine a path where you could go from, metaversal experiences now. Gucci dropping NFTs, or some advertising play, just doing the headlines, just because we need to engage consumers. So for now, it's very much just a consumer engagement tool. And then there will be, I suppose, metaverses and or verses like Netflixverse or Disneyverse, and so basically platforms still trying to retain their customers, but also engage the Gen Zs, the new demographics, and have a little bit of interoperability. Absolutely. In the form of virtual bags, virtual sneakers. Look at what Nike is doing right now, and that's in the pop culture, and it has to catch on.
I have a question about what we discussed before about brands that are using the metaverse, and this is a question for you, Cathy, to increase the engagement. There are some experiences that we see right now, so for example from companies like Netflix, that are using even self-contained games and experiences in order to create this fun engagement. What do you think needs to happen for media entertainment companies and broadcasting companies in order for them to start the next generation of this engagement in the metaverse? What are the killer use cases that you see for that?
The killer use cases, I suppose, has always been, if you try with one business model that doesn't work as well, then you're propelled to innovate. So to me, that's always, the fundamental driver of anything that's happening. Media entertainment and sport industry, which is, what's really to my heart, has always been one that's really struggling when it comes to business model. It's very difficult. It's very easy to get massive engagement, but the years, decades of the internet, basically the ongoing digital disruption has basically completely upended the kind of value exchange between the media owners and the consumers. So many consumers, especially the younger ones, they don't even understand that there's certain value exchange between the two sides. So that's definitely been one of the challenges, and that's what propelled the media entertainment companies to continue to look for the next breakthrough. But then again, back to the earlier point I pointed out, if you do ask a Web2 company, the majority of them will still tell you advertising works. Advertising is still where that drives most of the revenue. And look at what Netflix has been doing as the premium content owner. And they're going into gaming, but the gaming revenue, how much does that actually translate into the bottom line of the company? Right.
It seems to me that obviously they're doing it more for brand awareness rather than for business. I have a question for you, Cathy, again, about accessibility of the metaverse. Do you think that a multi-platform strategy should be at the core of an interoperable metaverse in order to remove the digital divide?
Absolutely, that's the answer. Even though how to get there is not that straightforward, because just think about if my email, if I own a Gmail account and I can only email someone else who has a Gmail, that doesn't make sense, right? So the open protocol must be put in place. But like I said, think about when the internet first arrived. It was a governmental research project, and very few people at that time understood the commercial upside and the potential of the internet. And eventually, we still ended up with so many walled gardens. And this time, people coming into this game with their eyes open, so they know the potential, kind of reward that's ahead of us. So think about how human beings can deal with all of these different interests and dilemmas and still work towards a open and interoperable future. It's not going to be easy. But at the same time, we will need to define at least, some things may be open, some things may not be open, but at least there needs to be a baseline that everyone can agree on. As long as the baseline has been achieved, there could be some levels of interoperability, and that's for the benefit of all.
Fabio, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to echo what Cathy said, I think this is the historical sequence of bundling and unbundling throughout the web. So definitely we've seen a bundling of offering services and then gathering users to platforms, and I think now we're going to a non-bundling phase with your avatar or your digital identity, where you can actually start going across platforms. In terms of accessibility, still difficult for the layman to actually enter the metaverse or enter a platform. Gaming is one thing, but that's demographic focused. So I think unbundling and having experiences where access is easy will be a first step for sure.
You mentioned before that gaming obviously is the most obvious use case for the metaverse, and obviously you have a population of gamers that are passionate about playing in those 3D worlds. But we've seen a lot of companies like AAA gaming companies trying to experiment with NFTs and fail spectacularly. It seems that there's some sort of a mistrust towards those gaming companies from the public. What do you think needs to happen in order to change this kind of vision and perception from the public about NFTs and crypto?
Yeah, absolutely. There's been a backlash, and again, different demographics. The case of Axie Infinity was super interesting, because some people could actually make a bit of a living playing game and earning money in Philippines and Venezuela. So there was a clear case during the pandemic for blockchain gaming and actually play and earn, which is the business model that emerged last year. But most traditional gamers, they just want to play games and have fun. So when you start talking about NFTs and tokens, and then you can earn tokens, and it's not in their mind, again, because they're not used to it. There is no need. So there's definitely a big educational play for blockchain gaming, for traditional gaming companies.
Sure, absolutely, Cathy.
Yeah, can I add to that as well? And Fabio is absolutely right. And I'm sure there are many gamers in the audience can tell us even better that because that's a constant battle between the game publishers and the fans in terms of how to monetize. The gamers wanted to play something for free forever, and then the game publishers, their goal has always been to monetize as much as possible, and the fans have been subject to premium downloadable content, microtransaction, all of that for so many years, and now all of a sudden with the arrival of NFTs, they realize they believe that, first of all, to Fabio's point, it doesn't really make playing game more fun. Right, and then if you don't invest, someone else does. In a game, you might as well lose to that person. So it's not fair either, and it's very different from, for example, the successful examples we've seen in the music, adoption of NFTs in music, because that's where at least the fans see that by subscribing, paying for certain NFTs, they're supporting the artists, and here you're just basically rewarding the big publishers, and also the publishers don't really make it optional either. You don't need to wear a branded T-shirt to go to a concert. It's completely optional. It's up to you. So at least you leave that choice to the people. So that's really where at least we see that's the failures of the gaming publishers so far, and in terms of how to fix it, I guess they will need to think about, first of all, and that's also the essence of Web3. How do you reward the individual creators and not just the big corporations behind it? I think that's probably the key.
Yeah, there's a nice example of Coca-Cola that basically gave the IP rights to the creators and allowed them to create new products and services for the Metaverse, which is an interesting way to do a top-down, bottom-up kind of economy in the Metaverse. I have the million-dollar question now. When do you think that consortium like the Open Metaverse Consortium or Kronos Group will be able to put everything on that table and build something that will work, and we're going to have finally the true interoperability of metaverse platforms? It's going to be like 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. What's your provision for that?
That's an impossible question. There are many groups out there, like the Kronos and others you mentioned, that are developing the kind of technical standards and protocols. There are also organizations like us. For us, we don't get into developing technical standards and protocols, but we focus very much on public-private collaboration to make sure whatever it is, the technology choices that the big platforms or the Web3 companies chooses to deploy, they will need to conform to certain principles, and there needs to be a clarification between the role of public sector versus private sector, always consumer protection in mind. There might be certain trade-offs that need to be made as well, because we know that from years of working on digital safety, privacy and safety is not always perfectly aligned, especially when it comes to children's safety. Privacy and safety and freedoms of expression is not always perfectly aligned. So that's going to be those challenges and problems will be even more significant when it comes to a construct like the metaverse. So back to your earlier point, I think it's going to take some time, quite a long time, because it's not a let's develop something and put it on the shelf, that kind of process. It's going to be an iterative kind of process that requires everyone, as long as you have a vision, to chime in and to build it together.
And I have a provocative question before we go to Fabio for you. Don't you think that maybe it's time for us to stop just deploying technology because it's cool having the technology out there, and doing it a little bit more responsibly and having some governance and some principles in place where everybody agrees before we really push the technology? I mean, we all want to avoid the Cambridge Analytica number 2, right? So, and the metaverse is a very powerful machine. It can be an empathy machine. It can control how you feel, what you see. It's possible to do eye tracking in the metaverse. There are so many things that can be captured from the consumer behavior. Don't you think that this should be the priority number 1, not only for the companies, but also from governments to look after?
That's exactly what we're trying to do. And you're absolutely right. You know, we talk about interoperability. Think about the privacy concerns. Because in the metaverse, it's not just your data, your self, contributed data. It's your biometric data. Think about if that data get hacked, what kind of consequences that could be. You can't just simply reset a password. Absolutely. It's not going to be like that. And who's safekeeping those data? How do we protect your data, your privacy, at the same time, and can still allow you to verify, authenticate who you are when it comes to financial transactions? Because that's where it requires KYC, for all those in the financial sectors. Safety, similarly, in the metaverse, it's not just that you're looking at some harmful text. You are being heard. You are hearing other people. They can. There could be unwanted touches. There could be, harassment. How are those going to be addressed in the future? So, of course, we wanted to put all of those principles in place. How to get there? It's not going to be easy, but at least, the organization like where I work at, the World Economic Forum, that's why we started this multi-stakeholder approach. And so far, we've already had, I think, 80, close to 90 different organizations, including some of the biggest platforms like Microsoft, Meta, HTC, Sony, Web3 companies as well. For example, Animoca Brands, Forte Labs, Decentralized, and Somnin Space. They're all part of this initiative, together with government, with civil society, and academia. So, yeah, absolutely, we wanted to put those guardrails in place before this vision actually take off. Fantastic, thank you. Fabio, what's your provision?
Sure. Going to the question of the timeline. As an investor, as a VC, you invest where we said where the ball is going, not where the ball is at. And investing too early is investing wrong as well. So the image I have is, did you remember that scene in Back to the Future with Marty McFly playing some old school Chuck Berry?
Yeah, sure.
Chuck Berry, and then he goes to heavy metal.
Yeah, it goes to heavy metal.
Like,
yeah.
and that's, I mean, so they were like, he jumped 50 years or 30 years of music. So the question is, how long will it take for the Web3 Marty McFlys out there to take us to that level of metaverse we want? It can come from everywhere, but pop culture, I just mentioned, hip-hop artists, gaming, those communities cross-pollinate. And it's hard to tell because they have their language, they have their culture, and that's sort of coexisting with our traditional culture. And there's a little bit of a divide and mismatch. So it's how long that, the new kids, the Web3 Marty McFlys will take to get to an interoperable metaverse, and the cryptoverse could actually take us there, and that's why we have to watch what's happening in crypto Web3, but not necessarily crypto trading, but actual applications and utility application. So that's the North Star, really, to see what's happening here and see how long it would take to bring people on board. With the governance, yes, I'm totally part of that initiative, and I think the forum is doing great in terms of saying, right, okay, this is the next generation of the internet. We got some things right from the Web 2, some things awfully wrong. We have a chance to fix it, and it's in the zeitgeist. We can see I will use a Marxist term for venture capitalists. It's always helpful, but there's like a qualitative leap that's happening. There's a zeitgeist where we're ready now, geopolitically and economically, and we need that to happen almost. So it could be 5 years, it could be 10, it could be 8, but in that region, I would say.
And we need a sustainable and inclusive metaverse as well.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah.
I'm not happy to say that also Accenture is part of this committee at Davos, which is great. Now I think that we can open up for some questions for the public. Anybody has some question? We have a raised hand over there.
Thank you very much. So my question is around the public realm.
Sorry, what's your name?
Oh, sorry, Devin Geary from the West Midlands Combined Authority. So my question is around the public realm and thinking of the metaverse as public realm. We've got social contracts in place in the physical world that govern how we interact with each other, but those are also then influenced by laws. So if we're looking at something as simple as don't kill because that's bad, we look at the in-group and the out-group sorts of ideas. So when you're thinking of these conversations at the triple helix level with senior stakeholders, where do you begin the conversation? Do you start at a high level? Do you start at the nitty-gritty detail, or do you start somewhere in between?
Excellent question. First of all, I wanted to acknowledge that. And we've been getting very similar questions from government, from some of the government agencies, for example, even Interpol, Europol, because how do we police the metaverse? That's one of the issues we have to tackle. And how do we stop terrorists from either the financial transaction or physical kind of virtual physical assault? Those are all the issues that's being discussed now. So first of all, we do need to, and that's why it's important, first of all, to raise awareness about the potential of the metaverse, because many governments around the world still think this is just entertainment. It's just kids play, but it's not, because I'm at the tail of millennial, but I can't say that I understand what my kids, when they grow up, what kind of digital environment they will be in. They will be native, and they will want it to be part of that. So for the government to, our advice has always been, join the work like this as early as possible to consider how do we moderate, the metaverse. Is it going to be? Are we going to apply real world laws and regulations? So very much similar to, for example, how do we moderate, someone who had a fight in a bar, like in the physical world, how do you moderate that? In the virtual world, if this is run and owned by a commercial property, then how do we moderate that? That should be different considerations. As well. So yeah, first of all, absolutely, we've been reaching out to many of the governments, and we've been working with, for example, governments of the UK, Australia, Singapore, Bangladesh, Belgium, Ukraine, and many others, and also at the EU level and different governmental agencies in the US. But it's a long way to go, because first of all, we need to make sure that these are the real danger that's going to come, and it's not just entertainment.
And I suppose that there will be unforeseen consequences anyway, but our operators of the metaverse, we have a moral duty to tackle them before they arrive. Tackle as many as possible before they'll manifest themselves. And one of the interesting things is that, for example, with the conversation that we're having at Accenture, some of the conversations are coming directly, obviously, from the senior management. Other conversations instead are bubbling up from situations that are happening in an empiric fashion. So we have some cases on the platforms that need to be tackled in some way immediately. So obviously there are two ways conversation that are happening, one top down and one bottom up. And this is going to be probably the norm for the future because we're exploring the technology. Fabio, would you like to add something?
Thank you. Yeah, a couple of thoughts. Once you put governments, words like governments and police and decentralization and there's a bit of a conundrum. We discussed this, and I'm sure we'll discuss it plenty of time. But I think it's time to introduce the concept of DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations. And I encourage you to look that up. And that's again, that exists in gaming, but not only. There are some social and citizenship initiatives where the trust is decentralized, and we're going back to the blockchain thesis and rationale here. But it's very much about decentralizing governance and having a governance in place, and the DAO starts doing that, and where we can bring, going back to the earlier points on gamers and traditional gamers, where we can bring traditional gamers into this Web3 world is by giving them not just a chance to earn, but a chance to own and control as well the destiny of their game. So we're moving from play to earn to play and own, or play and control even. And that's what the DAO is doing. And the DAO is being built and it's completely decentralized. It's under the radar. Tax-wise, it's a nightmare. Any tax lawyer here, I mean, you have great days ahead of you. But that's where I think a new social contract can emerge. And that doesn't need borders. And that's where governments can be threatened. And that's a huge challenge for the forum.
Probably, I believe that, if I may add one last point to the question that has been made before, one of the main questions, especially when it comes to DAOs, it's how much free speech do we want to give to those people? How much freedom do we want to give to those people? Decentralized autonomous organization is an example of perfect democracy, one-to-one, okay? But we've seen that sometimes perfect democracy, most of the times, fails. Because there will always be an emergence of some, unsocial behaviors, let's say like that. So one of the main challenges that I believe that governments and organizations and platforms themselves need to understand is where to put limits at this beautiful new technology that allows this kind of perfect democracy. So I think that that's probably the biggest challenge right now.
If I may just add one more sentence. Basically, I think the future is not going to be completely owned and run by the current institutions, but it's also not going to be, something that's completely run by the DAOs or any other kind of decentralized mechanism. The reality is it's always somewhere in between. That's like everything else in the history. At least that's my belief.
Any other questions? Thank you, by the way.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Eva, and I'm from Edge VC. My question is really, do you see any very interesting companies that are building the open metaverse, or any solutions that you think it's worth highlighting?
Fabio, that's
Would you like to know my pipeline as a fellow VC, do you mean? Yes, there are some very interesting companies, and they're very much into the, let's face it, I'm going back to it, but blockchain gaming, fashion, any sort of fun experience. So fashion events and gaming, I would say would be quite interesting. And like you mentioned earlier, data, digital identity, and digital identity can be avatars or any sort of protocols. So again, I'm focusing on infrastructure layer, monetization layer, and interface layer. So any sort of startup within, it's like a 3D Venn diagram, if you like, where you have creator economy and your experiences, and then those layers. So any startup in those spaces would be very interesting at the moment, I think.
And there's a news
without naming names.
And there's a news of Neil Stephenson joining forces to create Lamina One.
Well, it's a direct competition to the Metaverse initiative, isn't it?
No, it's not. That's private sector initiative.
Do you have any of those companies in mind, Cathy?
Well, we work with everyone. That's the beauty of, headquartered in Switzerland. So yeah, we work with anyone that has open metaverse, interoperable metaverse in mind. So yeah, we will welcome any companies to join, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, from my point, I've seen this news of Lamina One, and I think that it's interesting what they're trying to achieve. Also, they have some pretty good all-star people that are working in the board of directors. So also Tony Parisi from Unity, that was the head of AR and VR from Unity, joined the team recently. So we'll see what is going to happen. It's something that is completely built on blockchain. My only concern is that, as I said before, there are some companies that have some legacy systems that will not be able to move to the decentralized metaverse anytime soon. There are also some countries where decentralized technology is not even allowed. So how do you tackle interoperability and access to the metaverse in those countries? Obviously, there will always be a coexistence between metaverse and Web3. And just, to give an overview for people that are not familiar with the term, the metaverse can be Web3, so decentralized, but it's not necessarily Web3. So when people talk about, the metaverse Web3 is not correct. So it's just to give an overview of this. Any other questions?
Hi, thank you very much for the talk. It was really, really interesting. So all of these are new topics, and there are very few people actually able to understand what's needed to regulate and the implications also of all of these new technologies. And even the experts have still troubles in identifying them, right? So I was thinking, what kind of activities are you doing to educate the current and the future legislators and regulators about all of this?
Well, thanks for the question. So first of all, like I said, we wanted to raise awareness about the potential challenges that's going to come. And we already work with a range of governments. And we welcome them to be part of this initiative, because it's not about the forum having the answers. The answers always lies with the community, for public-private sector to have a chance to exchange ideas and also, discuss some of the trade-offs and potential balancing harmonization that needs to happen before we put any regulations in place. So yeah, again, in a nutshell, that's what we do, through any of our events, through the kind of, workshops that we run. It's all about bringing together public-private sector so that they no longer work on this in silos, like what we've seen during the past 10 years or so.
From an Accenture perspective, we are working very closely with the public sector, with many public sector clients. We are not precisely working on public-facing metaverse, but more towards the enterprise, especially, for example, for police departments, defense departments, and stuff like this. We are obviously educating them about the risks and advantages, in particular, of the metaverse, but I think it is important to see both sides of the coin, because it can be a very big gun. It is a very big gun. And we need to use it responsibly and give it to the hands of people that know what they're going to use and how, and let them understand how to best use it. Because as I said before, I believe that we are in a better stage right now where we understand that technologies don't need to be used just for the sake of being cool, because the technology is great. Let's use this platform as we did in the last 20 years with internet technologies and companies, and we have this moral duty of applying this kind of principle to everything that we deploy as metaverse operators and business people. Thank you. I think that we are up with the time. Thank you so much, Cathy. Thank you so much, Fabio, for being with us. Thank you so much to CogX for organizing this panel, and thank you so much to all of you for being here. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks.